Ooh. You made wine scary.
Yes! That's exactly what I wanted you to say.
We're running out of things now to not be scared.
Honestly, I wrote that with the intention of you saying you made wine scary.
Well, that...
Thank you, buddy. Good evening.
Hello.
It was my turn to be high energy, wasn't it?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Hello, everybody. And
Whoa.
Sorry.
Whoa.
Sorry.
That's already on a few likes.
Do you think?
Oh yeah, they're going mad for it right now in the comments.
It's not live.
Yeah.
Oh.
What? No, I just mean like right now, as they're viewing it, post-edited, post-upload.
What are you? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to How to Know. Today is our 11th ever episode.
That's
what
crazy.
A journey it's been.
That number feels
Well, I don't like 10 anyway.
That feels like more of a landmark for some reason.
It does, doesn't it?
11. It's just like
10 kind of.
We're like casually in the double digits now.
We're past it.
It's not a big deal to be 10.
Yeah, we're past 10. We're 11.
Yeah.
We're 1 and 1. We're
Yeah.
double ones.
We're close to 20 now than we are to our first video.
It's very wow.
Think about it that way.
That's a nice landmark.
Huge landmark. And Jack is going to landmark.
Well, it's interesting that we call it a landmark actually because it kind of correlates to this week's story.
Oh yeah.
Well, not really. It's loose. Well, anyway.
It better be linked to the title.
It's not really.
It's not.
Okay. I suppose we better do this.
Yeah. Give us the title.
This week's episode is called The Soil.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Thanks.
Earthy feel to it.
It was usually mid-afternoon when I'd see the woman from the window. At first she'd just be a speck in the distance, out in the fields that made up the vast majority of my new property, a blot of black and grey shadows slowly becoming clearer. Gradually though, as the day went on, I'd see her moving closer and closer, gently pacing past the bolt wire fence, past the dirt path and the line of oak trees that bordered my garden. That's where she'd wait, usually for several hours, staring from a distance into the kitchen window. I could never quite make her out though. Usually she'd be dressed in a long, flowing black dress, her hair a dark brown to the point of being cast on the absent side of a shadow. Sometimes she'd be wearing a slate overcoat and a bright red toque, depending on the weather. The winters were deathly cold out here in rural Ontario, and it was only fitting that the lady in the window would be dressed for the season. The first few times that I saw her, I'd stand on my porch, call out and ask if she was lost. This was wine country, after all, and oftentimes ramblers and groups of walkers would pass through the vineyards on a tour of the terroir. It wasn't out of place to see travellers out in the distant fields sampling the various grape that comprised the livelihood of the locals. But she was different. Simultaneously, she felt out of place, but also right at home in the same passing. She wasn't a tourist, that was for sure, but she also didn't belong here. This was my new home, but for some reason, I couldn't quite shake the feeling, and she didn't quite agree. I'd moved out to wine country first and foremost to write my book. I'd spent decades perfecting the art of commercial winemaking, but after a successful career of cultivating the mystery of the grape, I decided to buy a small property on the edge of the Niagara region with the intention of settling down and absorbing the landscape that had made me who I was. I say small because, whilst in all reality I had acres upon acres of prime Canadian soil at my disposal, comparatively it was nothing compared to some of the properties in the region. I made the kitchen my office, mainly down to the huge bay window that spread out from the rear wall, overlooking the garden and the fields beyond, with the intention of being inspired by the majesty of the landscape and letting it drip feed into my writing slowly, like a wine press. But that was before I first saw her, the woman from the window. That was before her cold, ever-present gaze had given pause to any kind of progress. It was safe to say that after a few weeks of the same played-out routine, she had become a distraction of sorts, albeit one that left me with a foreign, lingering chill in the pit of my stomach. By the third week, I decided to drive into town with the intention of finding out if anyone actually knew who this woman was. For all I knew, she was some long-time local that had held a grudge against the previous owners. Perhaps this was some sort of bizarre harassment campaign, and part of the reason why I'd snapped up my new home at such a low price. The estate agent had claimed that the previous owners, a divorced husband and wife, had wanted a quick sale as part of the settlement. At the time, I didn't really think much of it. In fact, I couldn't quite believe my luck, but I have to admit it was odd how quickly the whole thing had happened. It was as if they were running from something, and I simply just filled the space. Nevertheless, I loaded up the truck and made the 20 or so minute drive into town to a place called Somnar Sound, population 478. It had a farmer's market and a few bespoke restaurants, the kind of shtick that did wine pairings out on the patio, the kind of stuff you had to do to stay afloat. Had a few local drinking holes, nothing much though, plasterboard places that propped up a bar. Hell, it even had an LCBO. Despite that, Somnar Sound instantly felt a little out of reach in places, and I was coming to terms with the fact that I hadn't ventured into town since I'd moved into the farm. It almost felt cold, but not quite. Couldn't quite place my finger on why. It was too remote to have cultivated any kind of atmosphere or mise-en-scène, as they say in the region, and too young to have laid any roots to sow. It was odd. I didn't feel welcome, to say the least. I figured the best place to start would be the local bar, a place called Yvette's. The light was low inside, as expected, and a few bearded old boys dotted the bar nursing pints of amber ale, not talking, also as expected. I ordered a large glass of Sauvignon Blanc. I didn't ask what vineyard, and sat perched on a stool at the bar for a good 20 minutes before striking up a conversation with the bartender. I told him that I'd just moved into the new build out on the far side of town. He nervously nodded, asked me how it was, but he didn't seem to offer any hint of local suspicion. I asked him if he knew anything about a woman roaming the fields, but he pursed his lips and shook his head. Didn't take me long to figure that the bartender, he was new here. He pointed to an old man at the end of the bar though, balding with a tight moustache, and said I'd be better off asking him. And he was right. His name was Arthur Tenebrook, and he pretty much knew everything and anything that needed to be known about the surrounding area. When I told him that I'd just moved into the new build on the south side of town though, he frowned and furrowed his brow. He bowed his head, nodded towards his pint, and didn't seem to know what to say for a few moments. Then he looked up at me with his bright blue eyes and told me that I should leave the next morning. And then he said something that jarred me to the point that I wasn't quite sure how to react. He said that in some places of this world, the soil just isn't meant to be toiled. There are places across this earth that shouldn't be disturbed. Us being there, he said, it isn't natural. I didn't quite know what to say to that. I'd headed to town to search for answers about the woman out in the fields, about what was out there in the soil, but after that meeting with Arthur Tenebrook, I almost felt like I should have never asked anything at all. On the drive home, I couldn't quite shake the image of the way that he'd looked at me when I told him that I was living out in the new build. Hadn't even asked him about the woman out in the fields, but somehow I just knew that the two were related. The thing is though, the way that he looked at me, it wasn't out of anger or frustration as you might expect with a local. It was out of sadness, almost pity. When I'd made it back home, it was already dark out, but when I made it up to the front porch, a solemn feeling hit me in the pit of my stomach. That's when I realised the door was open ajar. It was creaking softly in the wind of the late spring. I opened the door, and on the other side of the handle was a deep red stain, almost like blood. As I stepped through, the same bright footprints pattered the hallway, walking around as if this home was their own. It was odd though. They were backwards. At first I was sure it was blood, but when I knelt down and drew my finger across it, the unmistakable scent of grape filled the air. It was a dark, ominous red threaded deep into the wooden floor like an ink stain. But when I followed it, it led me to the kitchen. Two small footprints tracing backwards as if their journey had ended at the threshold of my home, pacing around the kitchen, held softly at the workbench where I tried to write my novel, poised on the same wooden frame. But then they lilted, meandering across the woodwork out to the hanging hook where I hung the keys to my truck. There they stopped, patiently for an instant, staring out at the bay window across the kitchen, and slowly, gently, the footprints tiptoed toward the kitchen sink. And that's where I heard it. A gentle drip, 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 dripping, echoing down to the standpipe of the kitchen sink. And there, pooling in the plug socket, was a dark red liquid, bright and fervent, and despite every fibre of my being telling me not to, I leant down, I wiped my finger in the crimson wash, and then I tasted it. It was red wine. It was the most delicious red wine I'd ever tasted in my life. It was smoky, peaty almost, rich and light at the same time, floral to the point of ceremony. But for some strange reason, couldn't quite stop licking the finger that I tasted it with. Over and over again, the bright taste of tannin and iron and the fervent minerals that had created this ground, this soil. the earth that I had treated upon, the communion that I had made with it without warning. And that's when I looked up, out into the bay window of the kitchen, and I saw her standing there. The woman in the window, dressed in a long, black, flowing dress. She made her way out from the outer field, down past the dirt track, before the line of oak trees that bordered the garden. Now usually that was where she would stop, except this time she stepped out into my threshold like a determined lover. She paced closer and closer and closer, and before I knew it, I too was stepping outside, out into the garden, tasting the wine in my hands like a bee tastes its honey. Before I knew it, she was in front of me. Something strange had eaten its way inside of me, and suddenly that pang in my stomach became the most familiar feeling that I'd ever felt. She reached out a hand, and in the light of the moon, her hair shrugged down from her shoulder, from her face. The way that she smiled felt natural, but only in the way that you'd find in a mirror. Somehow, she was me, yet she seemed more than me, as if a seed had been planted and she was the result. In that moment, the only thought I had was to take her hand, and out there in the field, together, we sank into the soil. For those of you that don't know, in winemaking, the term terroir is defined as the characteristic taste and flavour imparted to a wine by the environment in which it is produced. Sometimes, though, pouring yourself into something is meant far, far more literally than you may have ever intended.
Ooh. You made wine scary.
Yes! That's exactly what I wanted you to say.
We're running out of things now to not be scared.
I wrote that with the intention of you saying you made wine scary.
Well, but that...
Thank you, buddy. Well, I mean...
That's already affected the score. I will tell you that already.
Oh no!
Well, because that was one of our criteria for like a good story, was like making something.
Oh, you mean in a good way?
Oh, in a good way, yeah.
Oh, wow,
yeah.
I thought you were like pulling,
No.
you were pulling points off me.
Yeah, good story. But I just want to tell you right off the bat.
Good story, but now that you said that, you're out.
Yeah,
you're out. You're done.
Wine is not scary. Obviously, I'll never be able to drink wine without thinking about some soil monster coming out. First thing I want to say before we get into the discussion is that like that had like a really different tone to your last stories. It was really weird because just as I realised this, the guy at the bar, what was his name?
Arthur Tennerbrook.
Arthur, right? He said, just as I was thinking, this is so sad, he said, sadness. And it was almost like, and like, I pictured it in a sort of movie way with these sort of like it's like discordant violins that are like slowly building up, but like, not in like a pure horror way, but just a sort of sadness is scary. Just a sort of like this home, this land, these people, whatever. It's a sadness, and it reminded me a lot of The Witch, right? So like, obviously, if you've seen The Witch, no spoilers here, but like, truly scary stuff starts happening about halfway through the movie. But the first half is still like chills because it's just so sort of sad and like there's just that sort of weird, loneliness, you know, and that really laid the foundation for when it got scary, and that was only amplified by when, by the way that he seemed. He.
Oh,
well, see, I thought it was. That's the thing, right? Because I thought it was he. I don't know why. Should I presume
she?
That? Did I just assume your character?
But no. No, but that is the first story that I've written from albeit first person narrative. It was
maybe that's
a
right.
female voice. Yeah, it was a female voice. But again, I only laid that in very minutely because obviously the woman in the field was her, or a version of her. That's what
flipped it for me. But
yeah, but it was very small.
But what added to that effect of just sort of loneliness, like serene, scary loneliness, was how calm she was. And it did have a little bit of that magical aspect to it where you think, is she sort of under a spell or something? kind of reminded me a little bit. If you guys haven't seen Jack's last story, Mr. Benjamin's Bunker, fantastic story. We talked a lot about like you made it very clear that feeling was very put upon him, the character. So I was thinking, I was like, is that the reason why she's so sort of calm? What was compelling her to pick up the wine? Why wouldn't you just walk out, call the police and be like, I've got an intruder in my home, they're walking backwards in blood before you even figure it out?
Excuse me, police, there are backward footprints in my house.
Yeah, I think it's blood. Have you tasted it? No!
It's wine.
Why would I taste it? Have a little taste. Like,
Have you tasted it?
Yeah.
The police would ever say that.
We've had a lot of this about...
You tasted it.
I
bet it's wine.
Could be wine. It's blood. Oh, it's actually blood. We've actually got a murder.
Listen, it's not wine, it's blood.
It's useless police. But like all of that just sort of added to it. Just like, I think also being a little bit scared of the actual main character as well. Like what's going on with you? Like I'm scared for you, but you're creeping me out too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like two layers.
It's a very particular type of person, and I'm trying to thread that through very kind of like,
well, like going out and
people
owning
who
a farm,
people like that, albeit what an awesome life and stuff like that. People like that dedicate themselves completely absorb their entire lives to craftsmanship, and that's what wine is. Wine is the expertise and like the mastery of a landscape, and that takes a certain type of person, right? So,
and something about Canada as well made that feel quite unique as well, because
well, it was kind of from our little trip to wine country that kind of partly inspired it, because they're very particular types of people who carve an existence out of there. It's fascinating. Like
and it is different to where we come from. Like from most farms, you can see a corner shop.
Yes.
Like a lot of farms, it's not that sort of like I'm out here cultivating the land. I'm trying to wrestle with the land. Like it's very much tamed.
Yeah.
Whereas parts of Northern Ontario seem a bit wild, but they're constantly fighting back.
Yeah.
And Arthur
Tenenbrook.
like he was saying, like it's almost like we shouldn't be like this. It's this desolate and cold and lonely and stuff for a reason, But humans
grow wine there.
Yeah, they grow wine there.
Which is amazing.
And so wine's ruined in the best way possible.
What's ruined?
But also, like, you kind of made me feel like that character, because, like, I'm not gonna lie, I want to taste a bit of that wine. Like when you started describing it as that, which is such a powerful technique for like an evil spirit to do, to like attack our senses that way, because we're such slaves to our senses. You can make something taste that nice. But people go for it.
Maybe that wine will crop up in a later day.
Oh my god. I'm going to look back over all your stories and all of them
Just
had
a
that
wine
wine.
bottle.
It's like, you always like throw a random line in. And like, they walk past a wine bottle dripping. I'm like, that's weird. Bad line.
Bad line. It's worth it for it.
I'm like, you wait till episode 11. Hello, makes sense.
Wait.
Episode 11.
You wait
Here
till
it
the
comes.
soil.
As usual, fantastic writing, fantastic description. I love the references to like winemaking throughout. That was a really, really good technical piece of writing.
Thanks, man.
And going back to what I said right at the start, what really bumped it up from a sort of, creepy, lonely woman in the distance to the next level was actually affecting something so mundane, not mundane, but something so ordinary as wine, and really making me scared of it. One other last point I was going to say was that hit a chord with what I find really specifically scary, which is people in the distance.
Why?
Yeah, I'd rather have someone right here that's absolutely terrifying than someone over there standing there. There's one thing that's always scared me in horror movies. I'm sure we've talked about this before. It's the woman in the window.
Yes.
What's the horror movie that was remade with Daniel Radcliffe?
Woman in Black.
Woman in Black, right?
Yeah.
And there is that scene where he just sees in the window, and
That's
like, I'm getting
horrifying.
chills right now on my neck thinking about it.
Well, I did have a very particular film scene in mind, actually. There's a great classic horror film called, it's not really a horror film, it's like a psychological thriller, called Black Narcissus.
Okay.
And you will have seen the GIF. It's like almost like late.
Is it like Japanese?
No.
Oh.
But the kind of, she's a very stern looking lady, and it's a long panning kind of like almost like a Jaws-esque shot.
Yeah.
And it's coming from like a farmhouse in the distance, and she opens the door and she's got the most piercing, horrific eyes. I'll show you later, but like if you guys have seen,
she's like a long way away.
That kind of entire image is always stayed with me, because I again have like a fear of like remote people in like staring at you from distance. But that scene like always plays in my head. I can see it vividly now.
Yeah.
And that kind of was the inspiration for that as well.
Yeah.
She's in kind of like a rural, remote, isolated home.
Yeah. It taps into a real primal thing. We talked a while ago about masks and why we find masks scary, because you can't gauge what someone's intent is.
What's happening in the forest tonight?
Some banging in the forest.
Foresters. Sorry.
Yeah, we talked about how masks are scary because you can't gauge someone's intent, and like I said, I'd rather someone be in front of me and go, okay, you want to kill me, cool, I can deal with that. Let's deal with that situation now, than the person on the hill 2 miles away looking at me. That I don't know if they're good, bad, psycho, if they're some mythical monster, whatever. That's terrifying. So
that's a good fear to have.
All of that wrapped in, plus that was great. Plus the affecting the wine, that has made me feel like a 7.8. Like a good 7.8.
I had that in my head as well.
You had that in your head for you?
It's feeling. Hey, I got to gauge it myself. Thank you. That was.
Yeah, I like.
I must admit, I don't say this about all of them, but like I was very proud of that one.
Yeah.
Kind of felt like I moved a little bit away, like started. I kind of like pushed myself a little bit.
That's like one of the first things I said was that it really was a different tone, really different tone. It wasn't, a couple of your stories. I love that we got like a story to talk about.
Yeah,
now,
I know.
Reference.
We've got the data.
But some of your stories were very much that, come here, sit by my fire, dearie. Let me tell you a cautionary tale and all this kind of stuff. And this was just a different feel together. Like I didn't feel like this person was even trying to caution us. They were just because they've been taken in by it, right? So it was just pure sadness and loneliness and being sucked into something they didn't want, and they didn't seem that sad about it in the end. Do you know what I mean?
They knew as if this was the point. They became what they.
Yeah, and that must be where they're telling us a story from as well. So, yeah, really, really good new tone, good new direction.
Thanks, man.
And that's why.
Love that new direction.
New direction.
You heard it here first, guys. Expect soil-based horror from me.
That's why. Yeah.
If you have any soil-based horror, please send it to this address.
Oh yeah, we've got an email where you can send your stories in,
and we will be reading them out. The next live stream, which will be this week.
I think maybe the week after.
The week after.
Yeah.
No, the week after. So next Friday from this video.
Yeah, sure. Why? We're gonna. Yeah.
Stay tuned. We already actually have some awesome stories queued up that we've received in our ohno inbox, which we can't wait to read out. So if you're watching this now's your chance. See if we can pick it. Obviously, we've said this before. We love the fact that you guys even take the time to write something down, create something, and send it to us. Like, even that in itself is like means so much to us. But obviously, we can only read the most relevant stories out on the live stream. So if you do get picked, thank you so much. We love it, but all of them are appreciated. So.
And we do like read in some way all of them.
Oh yeah, all of them.
It's just we've got a lot to sort through at the minute. But don't let that stop you. Keep sending them in. We're still reading ones out on our live streams from like weeks before.
Yeah. So
yeah, don't be afraid to send it in, and there's a very good chance we'll read it out in the future. Until then, you could give this video a like and a comment. That makes our day. Like I probably said last week as well, we really, really appreciate every single like and comment. If you're watching this and you leave a comment, we are going to read it. We are going to heart it. And it'll make our day, and hopefully make yours too, because we have a conversation. So please do that. Stay tuned for next week, we've got a special guest.
We do indeed. This is a secret.
Stay tuned for next week, because we actually have a special guest, someone that you probably don't know about. Some of you might know. I think that's as many clues as I want to give.
That literally
no. But it's going to be great. We're really excited. It's our second ever special guest. Make sure you tune in for that. Now it's time to blow out this old fire, I think.
Guess what? Also, I've been drinking this wine for 2 weeks.
I swear it was red at the start. Pour out of the fire.
This is good wine. Thank you so much, guys. He's been
Danny Burke.
I've been Jack Finch. You've been watching. Oh no! Thank you so much for stopping by our fire. And on that note, see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Why? 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 Why?